Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It is Thursday, August 8th today, and I'm sitting down to do a little brief catch up on some of the planetary transits that are taking place right now and in the next few days to come. So, right now, some of the big things that are happening in the sky involve some very harmonious trines from Venus and the Sun in the sign of Leo to Jupiter in Sagittarius. The moon's also just entered Sagittarius, so we're picking up the waxing trine from the moon as it's heading towards full. That's always kind of a beneficial time of the moon cycle. It's one of my favorite times of every moon cycle because as the moon is growing, its power is growing, the intensity of the lunar cycle is growing, which generally means that everything's kind of buzzing and everything's being woven together and things are starting to come together more quickly as the trine is taking place, especially because the trine is of the nature of Jupiter. And when the moon trines the sun after the new moon for the first time, it means that things are gathering together and that essentially that the force of the full moon is picking up momentum like a wave that's about to break. And it's reaching that peak. A lot of force that's being gathered at that time. And usually it's pretty harmonious because, again, trines are of the nature of Jupiter. You have harmony between the lights. You have just kind of the cosmic thumbs up. Now, of course, there's always a lot of other things going on that create a context for that trine. Sometimes it's not as easy, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more challenging. I'm going to plug in the outer planets so that we can take a look at those as well. But right now, this is genuinely a pretty positive trine, opening trine of the moon cycle. And the reason for that is that we have, not only do we have harmony between the lights coming in the next couple of days, taking us into the weekend, but there's also a couple of things happening that are generally, pretty good. So for example, you've got both Venus and the sun moving through trines to Jupiter. So that's anytime you get a couple of trines to Jupiter right in a row, especially from the sun, you're also talking about a time when there's increased support and there's Jupiter as a planet of confirmation tends to, again, just give the cosmic thumbs up. And I've mentioned this a few times before, but Jupiter and the sun also happen to be the triplicity rulers of the fire signs, and they're in fire signs. So both by day and by night right now, the triplicity rulers are trining one another, which means there's just a lot of help and support available to us. Everybody's karma is different. So I'm not saying that everyone's just going to be, cruising in a new convertible right now. But one of the things that you can look for is even just one of the things that I like to do, for example, is just, I spend a lot of time writing. So I spend a lot of time also journaling. And if you just sit down with your thoughts, you'll notice sometimes even the first quarter trine, what to speak of a first quarter trine loaded with a bunch of trines from Venus and the sun to Jupiter, that inner voice of conscience, the voice of divinity in our hearts, that gives us that little hunch that we need, saying, I think I ought to do this, or this is the way I should go. That voice can just be so clear when these trines are coming through. At the same time, sometimes the trines come through, especially with a lot of fire, and it's like, all hands on deck. It's all action, and sometimes all impulse. And Jupiter and the sun also can come together and, just become a little arrogant or a little puffed up, or, we can be tempted into some kind of display of grandeur or self-righteousness or something like that. But even those kinds of events can be somehow harmonized right now with Venus in the mix. If you've ever, for example, I can't help but think about my daughter all the time, my older daughter, Gigi. She called herself Gigi, by the way, when she was little. Like, her name's Virginia, and all of a sudden one day we were calling her Virginia, and she goes, "No, I'm not Virginia. I'm Gigi." We're like, all right. So, and it's just stuck, and she just loves being called Gigi. Anyway, so I think about my daughter a lot, and one of the things that you'll notice is that, you know, when a little kid is trying to learn how to do something new, like let's say she has this kind of like a tricycle, and she's learning how to ride it, right? So when she learns how to ride it, right, and she will overcorrect, like turn really big or whatever, you know, if you do that on a mountain bike at 30 miles an hour down a steep hill, that slight, you know, overcorrection to one side or the other can like throw you off the bike and, you know, like into a ravine where there's like a mountain lion waiting or something. This is the unfortunate thing about, I advise everybody not to stay up too late at night, because you'll be tempted to look at endless YouTube videos like the one I'm making. And then you'll see things like hikers warding off cougars with Metallica music, like I did recently. Anyway, so if you try to overcompensate and you fly off your bike and into a ravine, and there happens to be a mountain lion there, that would be a really extreme response to a small mistake. So sometimes there's that, the fire signs like to take control. They like to be authoritative. They like to own it, right? So when a kid's learning to ride a bike and they're first trying to take control of the wheel, you know what I mean? There's training wheels. In the case of our little tricycle, it's something like training wheels, and it's hard. It's a weird bike. It's hard to explain. So the nice thing is that if she makes a mistake, she sees it, but she doesn't fall over. She gets the feeling of having made a mistake, but there's compensation there. That the little, like in the case of a training wheels, the training wheels catch. So similarly, right now, it's also like if you overcompensate, if you go too far, if you do something that's a little extreme, with Venus in the mix and the nice trines to Jupiter, it's also like there's just a built-in sense of like, you went a little too far there. No hard penalty. It's okay. I find a lot of the times that's actually what Jupiter brings into our lives. Nice Jupiter transits aren't always just about giving you something great, or, you know, getting $1 billion in the mail or something. It can also be, that could have been a lot worse, but it wasn't. So watch for that right now as well. So you think about the momentum of the moon cycle building right now. There's a lot of, you know, kind of build, develop, gain support, you know, see something expanding. That's a trine, opening trine in a moon cycle. What to speak of an opening trine in Jupiter's sign, moving towards Jupiter with the Sun and Venus in trines to Jupiter. So a lot of kind of building momentum in general right now. Now, the Sun's trine to Jupiter has just passed. Venus's trine to Jupiter is today, and it's still, just as you can see on the live clock here, it's just a few minutes off. And so that means it's, you know, it's pretty much exact. Within 3 degrees of being exact, ancient astrologers had a concept that they used, and one of the ways that concept has been translated, one of the conventional translation terms that's used, is an engagement. So when a planet is within 3 degrees of making its exact aspect to another planet, it's engaged. And then when a planet makes that exact aspect, it perfects. And then as it moves away from that aspect, it was said to emanate or separate. We sometimes use the word separate, but also the word emanate was used. And also the idea, a phrase that's sometimes used is that the planet, after it's made the aspect, is flowing forth. And this is really important. One of the images that was used by one of the chief translators of the ancient Hellenistic astrology text, Robert Schmidt, he mentioned the image of fruit that is falling off the tree, or even like a hair that's grown out of your head and then falls off. So when the fruit has fallen off the vine, that's what's also happening during the emanation process, which is what Venus and the sun are now in for the next couple of days. So the other thing that people sometimes miss when they're tracking transits is that whatever an astrologer is describing, there's a building process, there's a perfecting process, and then there's a fruiting process. Often you actually see the results during the fruiting process. So you might, over the weekend, as these planets are separating, see the fruiting process. The way that would look with Leo and Sagittarius and Venus, Sun, and Jupiter is typically going to be about finding friends, Venus, allies, Venus, love, Venus, support, harmony, beauty, romance, or even romantic love, and to find it to find that as something that's coming in to support a greater purpose, a greater belief, or a greater message. That's the trine to Jupiter, or a greater project, which is the Sun-Jupiter combination, some vision or some master sense of a grand plan. The other thing that can happen is the adherence to the sun that Venus is about to get into, which when it conjoins at the same degree, it's as though the two planets merge with one another. And then we have kind of a commingling of the Venus-Sun qualities, but it's also a special status called Cazimi. Let me just fast forward this and show you exactly when it's going to happen. All right, so if we just fast forward this just a bit, you're going to see Venus coming into the same degree over the weekend on Saturday, and then watch how it evolves from there. So then you've got on August 11th, it's at the same degree, August 12th at the same degree, August 13th at the same degree, August 14th at the same degree, but now Venus has passed the sun just barely. August 15th, it's still within a degree, but now they've changed degrees. So between now and the 15th, which is the full moon, we have a very long-standing and very powerful and very auspicious Venus Cazimi. Cazimi means at the heart of the sun, and it has the feeling as though it's as though Venus becomes seated on the throne of the sun. Venus becomes greatly empowered. Oprah Winfrey has a Venus Cazimi in her chart that she was born with. So there's a greatly empowered woman and author and actress, and she's in the arts and so forth. Oprah's book club, all of this. So Venus Cazimi will often indicate an empowerment of something Venusian. And with Leo there, the sun in its home sign, it's kind of extra special because the sun is also greatly empowered in its own sign, has more power to grant to Venus. For example, I heard something recently, and I think there was a candidate that's now putting forward an ad in Iowa, one of the Democratic candidates, and they're spending like a boatload of money on it. And I don't remember which one it was, but so this is an example of the coming, it's foreshadowing, Venus trine to Jupiter, kind of putting forth this big thing, trying to rally support. And it wouldn't be surprising to see the empowerment of women in some major way between now and the new moon, or the full moon, excuse me. So the other thing, of course, that can come with this is just Venus has the general meaning of friends and allies. And Jupiter also has a general meaning of being supportive and is connected with the 11th house in every birth chart, which is the house of good spirit and the joy of Jupiter. It's a place of allies and friends and benefactors and groups of people that are like-minded. So with Venus and Jupiter getting together right now, it's also where friendship and like-mindedness may come together in a strong way, and in a way that's has some executive power behind it. Let's not forget we've got Mars in Leo right now at the same time. The other thing that's really cool that's happening on the 11th that's just coming up is Jupiter's turning direct. So as Jupiter is turning direct in Sagittarius on the 11th, that also means that Jupiter is about to undergo a transformation and Jupiter now picks up momentum. The retrogradation often means Jupiter is in a period of time where it's letting go or giving back things that have been gained. For example, you get a big paycheck, then you get a big bill. Jupiter direct and then Jupiter retrograde. So if you got a big paycheck and then a big bill comes in during the retrograde period and then Jupiter turns direct again, it's like, okay, paid off the bill, can start earning and, or getting out of the red or whatever. So there's this sense of Jupiter recovering and gaining power. And so Jupiter's at this pivotal turning point. It may also be that something that we've been hoping to receive support from or something that we've been waiting for, and we're just waiting to, it's kind of like you're sitting on the runway waiting to take off and you just, oh my God, once we take off, I'll be fine. But it's just like sitting here, because even when you get in the air, there's just that feeling on an airplane trip where you're like, I'd rather know that I'm on my way than having to sit and wait to sit and wait more. It's easier to know you're on your way than to have to sit and wait to be on the way. Jupiter's kind of like that too right now, stationing, about to turn direct. It's as though Jupiter wants to help us take off somewhere, and it's something might just be coming through right now that's really helpful, but it's going to take a little bit to enact. There's a weekend worth of Venus and the Sun sort of flowing forth, the fruits dropping off from this trine, Jupiter's turning direct. It may take all the way, for example, up until you've got the moon in Aries a little bit later in the month, and that would be that's the disseminating trine. Once you get into the disseminating trine, that's when sometimes the fruits start, the fruits that have been gathered through the full moon, or the peak of the lunar cycle. In the lunar cycle, the flowing forth, the emanating really comes during the disseminating trine, whereas everything's sort of swelling, right? It's really funny. Like for those of you women out there who have kids and, have had to do like breastfeeding and all of that, it's really funny. Like my wife has had to teach on the weekends at the yoga studio and stuff like that. And, it's like she'll, even though she's not with the kids all day, on some days, and I'm like, maybe I'm having to like bottle feed my younger daughter at home, she'll be like, oh, I knew right when you were probably feeding her because your boobs start hurting if you're a woman, right? Like they just like start hurting. And so in some ways, like when a woman's milk drops, probably a lot, if you're a guy, sorry if this is like TMI, I'm just like surrounded by kids and the stuff's just real. So, when a woman's milk drops, right? And it's like, okay, game on. And if it keeps going, like it's going to hurt, So that's sort of like also, and then when it starts flowing forth, when you actually start feeding the kid and you start experiencing some relief, that's kind of like the difference between a building trine and a disseminating trine in the moon cycle. Why mention this? Because right now we're more on the building trine. Even though these trines are really, really supportive, my sense is that, and the reason I'm mentioning this emanating, the period after the trine, as well as the disseminating moon trine comes after the full moon, which is more like August 19th, about 10 days from now, is that people are really impatient with astrological transits, right? They're like, well, what about those trines that happened earlier in the month? I thought something good was going to happen. It's like, well, pay attention, right? Because there's a few different stages in every lunar cycle. The moon's weaving it all together, right? And as the moon's coming down on that disseminating trine, that can also be a time where this gets enacted. You're going to see, for example, on August 19th, that the moon's going to pick up that trine to Jupiter, which is just getting, just moving forward direct again. And then it's going to get into trines to the sun and Venus. So, we have, there is a process, I would say, for the next 2 weeks, really, of potentially seeing the fruit of this transit come out and be of support to us to nourish our spiritual path in the weeks ahead. I also thought to mention the breastfeeding thing because I believe it's like International Breastfeeding Week. And I've been, talking to, well, not really talking to my wife about it, but my wife's been talking about it because she's been sharing that with a lot of her friends right now. So anyway, it's just another. It seems like nowadays there's like every day is something else too. It's like, not that I'm not excited to share this holiday, but it's like the other day I was caught off guard. I think my sister sent me a message like it's International Sibling Day, and I was like, that's a thing. I was like, okay. So at any rate, all right. Let's see what else. Let me go back to our clock right now. So the other thing that's kind of interesting that's happening over the next couple of days is we're also seeing Uranus turn retrograde. So Uranus is a funny one when it turns retrograde because, to me, it's a terrible image, but it's sort of like Uranus direct is sort of like just holding on to a fork while it's plugged into a socket, right? Or you're sticking it in a plug. And you're just kind of like, it's kind of holding on. And I find the retrogrades of Uranus are almost like, okay, pulling the fork out, setting it down and being like, I'm just going to not electrocute myself for a little bit here. And that was fun and shook everything up, totally jarred my reality. But now it's time to kind of integrate and set up the systems that have been, coming through the new paradigms or the new structures of doing the way that we're going to do things. Those structures have changed. And I always find, and this is just my personal take, that Uranus retrograde is like, it just eases off a little bit from the crazy eccentric qualities where it's just jolting you into newness constantly. It's not, I don't want to be too, I feel like I shouldn't be too specific about that because there are exceptions, of course. Uranus in direct motion can signify any kind of upheaval, change, inventiveness, revolution, defiance, originality, technological developments. And the retrograde can also signify times when there's some reevaluating, fixing, breaking down of some sometimes we put forward new ideas and new paradigms in our life so quickly. We're not sort of troubleshooting things. And then the retrograde comes up and it's time to sort of evaluate, stop and be like, wait a sec, have I just joined, have I just joined a cult? Like, what have I done? Like Uranus is always so pumped about whatever the new change is. It could be a little reckless though. And so sometimes the retrograde is also just a time to fix things if they've become a little wild or if things have gotten a little tattered in the process of change and newness. So that's something to think about. Interestingly, Uranus turns retrograde on the same day Jupiter turns direct. That feels, I can't say that like, oh yeah, that's so, the whole world, everyone's leveling up. Level 11 is coming for everyone, like let's have a new age party. I don't know. Like, I don't have no idea what it means. But it's something that I'm going to watch carefully, especially right around like 10th, 11th, 12th, right in that kind of like give it like a 72-hour window and see what that feels like. Because I don't think I can recall a time where I saw those two planets in particular changing directions simultaneously. The thing is, I was told by someone one time, I don't know if it's true, but I was told by someone one time that all of the planets in our astrological language, I think including the outer planets, will never all be in the exact same place twice before the sun burns out. I like to remember that because sometimes in astrology, it's like, oh yeah, this means that, like, oh yeah, this totally means that. And then there's just these cults of personality that we get into. We become one or we tune into one or whatever, where it's just like, oh yeah, this is what that means. And just kind of flippant, authoritarian, overly charismatic, know-it-all stuff about astrology. It just drives me crazy because I feel burdened by the need to be honest. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what's going to happen. But actually the cosmos itself tells us as much. It's like, yeah, well, none of this stuff's ever really happened twice before. We think that it has, but it hasn't. The whole context is never really the same twice. It's like the saying from Heraclitus, I think it was, who said you can't put your foot in the same river twice. So we should always keep that in mind, and remember that astrologers are just like, we're like cosmic karmic weathermen. So let's see what that's about. I think my kind of inkling about this is that Jupiter turning direct while Uranus is turning retrograde means that a period of disruption that's been meaningful and powerful and good, but disruptive, Uranus going forward since it entered Taurus, is now going to slow down, and Jupiter turning direct, we're going to start reaping the benefits or start expanding or growing as a result of upheaval and disruption. And that there's some corner that we're turning right now with that. I can tell you that I feel that right now in terms of, like, right now as we do this, my kitchen is finally being finished downstairs. So my life's going to get back to normal. It's a small example, but along with that, there's been a lot of, like, this summer for me with health and family stuff and travel and everything there's been so much upheaval and disruption, and to the normal patterns that I'm used to, right? And as a Taurus rising in a Cancer, I like my patterns. So I have a feeling that as this is finishing up, it's going to be a really nice corner to turn. So maybe it will be for you as well. I'd love to hear from you guys and hear how it goes. Remember, Mercury's just turned direct recently as well. That's pretty cool. Having Mercury going direct slowly, you forget also that there's a whole, like, when Mercury turns direct, it's subtle because they're pretty common, but pay attention to that as well. Like, look to the Cancerian area of your chart and watch some kind of turnabout that happens in that area. For example, there was a whole, like, it's in my third house, siblings, right? There was a kind of a big event happening for a sibling in my family. And the event really started turning around for the better right as Mercury turned direct. It's a simple thing, but you can pay attention to those momentum changes as well. The turn to direct usually means something recovering or something starting to gain momentum again after maybe a period of weakness, decline, delay, setbacks, or loss. These ebbs and flows are part of life. I was actually reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam earlier today. This, by the way, is my Venus-Jupiter moment for the day. I finished the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is 12 cantos and 18,000 verses. And you can see it up on my top shelf up there. You can't even really see the whole thing. It spans across the whole top shelf. And this is, for people who are into Krishna Bhakti, this is like the Bible. And it is just, I actually got tempted to read it because one of my yoga teachers that I was doing a private apprenticeship with him. His name's Hari Kirtan. And I told him I studied memoir writing in grad school, and he said, "Oh, you would enjoy the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's like the biography of God." And I was like, "Oh, I can't pass that up. That sounds pretty interesting." So I ended up reading it and cover to cover, and it took me 2 years, just about 2 years right now. I got it off the internet, got my wife looked and was like, that massive box full of books, and she was like, "You're crazy." I was like, it's a Purana. It's the Bhagavat Purana. It's a classic Indian scripture filled with amazing stories about God and what God likes to do. I was like, so I got to check that out. I finished it today. Anyway, so that it was weird. I finished it literally at the time that Venus and Jupiter in a trine were exact. I thought, well, that's kind of neat. At any rate, in the 12th canto, as I was reading today, one of the things that I thought was really beautiful was that there was a description of that there was a prayer, and it was saying, "May we be soothed by the sound of God's breathing, which kind of takes a subtle ear to hear. And it was compared to, God's breathing is compared to the tides coming in and out. If you want to think about God's breathing, think about the tides. And then it was said, maybe we be soothed and comforted by the sound of God's breathing, which is like the tides. So I think about that a lot with all these retrogrades and all the movements of the planets back and forth, back and forth. It's really a rhythm in the sky. And if we tune into it long enough, a lot of the predictions come true, and they're really interesting. A lot of archetypal symbolism and psychological value to doing this. But I like to think also of what we're doing as learning to hear the cosmic tides and learning to be soothed by the breathing of divinity. So with that, I will leave you today. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll be back maybe with some updates over the weekend. I got some really good Q&As I might dive into as well. So take care. We'll see you soon.